What is it that makes North Carolina our place? What makes it home? For some of us, it comes from deep down. Our people are here. For some of us, even while it's home, it's a place we experience systemic inequality. For still others, it's a new place full of excitement. For some, North Carolina provides environmental initiatives to support and research to explore. For many like myself, it is the place we created our first memories and the place we will cherish our last. North Carolina is my place. After college, I lived in 7 other states and worked as a documentary photographer in more than 20 countries. Throughout that time, when someone has asked where I'm from, I haven't hesitated. No matter where I was living at the time, I'm from North Carolina. My name is Susie Post Rust, and this is my photographic exploration of my home. My mother, Rose Post, moved to Salisbury, North Carolina when she was 13. My grandparents were opening a clothing store on Main Street. It was the Great Depression, and they would live above the store. Like in many small towns in North Carolina, Main Street is also Highway 70. My grandparents' store, Zimmerman's, was on the right, just beyond Council Street. My mother lived in North Carolina all but 2 years of her life. This is a legacy she has given both me and my daughter. Rose Post worked as a writer at the Salisbury Post for more than 50 years. In 1998, she traveled the main streets of our state, looking for what it means to be a North Carolinian. She began her project in Atlantic, North Carolina, where the ocean meets the land and the trees bend away from the salt and the sand. She journeyed on Highway 70 across North Carolina, all the way to the Blue Ridge Mountains on the border of Tennessee. And now I'm doing the same, traveling Highway 70 across North Carolina. I'm primarily photographing, not writing. I'm inspired by her words and informed by her journey, but I'm not revisiting every place my mother went, although in some situations I am finding the next generation. This year I was fortunate enough to become part of the Community Engaged Scholarship Collaborative at Duke. I've been working with this generous and supportive cohort to expand the project. I began photographing in the fall of 2019, and I wasn't really sure what direction it would take. In March of 2020, COVID arrived. Things shut down indefinitely. It felt like a cloud descended, and it seemed that overnight we became isolated. A darkness enveloped many people. Daily COVID updates were sent, and fear escalated. Meanwhile, members of Reopen North Carolina marched weekly in our capital. Protesters made demands of the governor outside his mansion. An anonymous Grim Reaper wandered through the crowd of unmasked protesters, silently challenging their view. Food insecurity surged as children who were receiving 2 meals a day at school were no longer at school. Local volunteers worked with restaurants and the DPS Foundation to create a delivery system for anyone who needed food. And then George Floyd was killed. Thousands of mourners flocked to Rayford, North Carolina, to attend his memorial. Friends clung to each other after seeing the casket, wondering aloud what kind of world their children would face. Students in Durham organized a candlelight vigil, drawing more than 500 people. They sat silently for 9 minutes, 25 seconds, the amount of time that Floyd was pinned to the ground. High school students still celebrated and still mourned the transition. Protests against police brutality marched straight down Durham's Main Street. It was a time of reckoning. The summer was charged with passion. What crystallized for me is that while fighting for what we believed in, we became adamant against others. With our individualized news feeds and the election looming, the people with whom we disagreed became whole groups that had labels: immigrants, the religious right, liberal white women. I made a decision about this project. I decided to dig deeper and document individuals who fit into those categories, but without naming the label. I wanted to find what we have in common. Almost 1 in every 10 people in North Carolina is Latinx. Along Highway 70 in Haw River, the Hispanic grocery stores have phones that can be used to call Mexico. Kelly Torres Rivera was born in the United States. She lived in Mexico until she was 4 when she crossed the border with her mother. At the age of 19, Kelly married Philemon Alvarez in a shopping center on Highway 70. The event drew the whole family on both sides. Their families worked hard to transform the empty storefront into a beautiful wedding venue. Everyone celebrated. The food was amazing, and it was a big time. The band played traditional music late into the night. They were surrounded by people who loved them. The future looked bright for Kelly and Philly. The day Philly got the keys to their first home was a time for celebration. Philly was working construction, and Kelly was working at a gas station and cleaning houses.
I did come in here with high hopes, a lot, like really high hopes. We came in here 3 months pregnant, expecting things to just go smoothly because we had a plan. We were working really hard, getting our things together, and then COVID hit. And once that started, it was like we were cooped up in home, newlyweds with a newborn baby, no money, didn't know how we were gonna make it for light or water or bills. This was the first stable place I ever had. I never had a stable home, and that's all I want for my kids.
Kelly has a close-knit family, and her mother Laura offered that they could move home to save money to buy a house. They had to move the furniture out of the living room to convert it into a space for Kelly, Philly, Casey, and the new baby. With the support of her family, Kelly hopes they will be able to buy a place of their own in a few years. In 1952, the Jewish congregation in Salisbury had grown to 23 families. They found land and built the temple. It became a place that Jewish traditions were passed generation to generation. Over the next 70 years, there were more than 40 bar and bat mitzvahs, taught primarily by 2 teachers. The congregation grew and thrived over time. In recent years, the building fell into disrepair. The congregation was shrinking, a pattern seen in many small towns across the state. With an average age for its members in their 70s, the congregation made the difficult decision to sell the building. The Presbyterian Church next door offered their library as a meeting space. Members of Temple Israel had to decide what to take. The Torahs would need an ark, and the library had to be emptied.
So the key to what kinds of items, what kinds of books are buried in the Jewish cemetery is really whether or not they contain what are called shemot. Shemot is the plural for names. If one of the shemot, one of the sacred names of God, is written in the text, then because we do not want to erase or destroy God's name, we instead treat it as the repository of the names and place it in the grave.
Sukkah was the last service held on the property. You can see the church where they would meet in the future in the background. Move-out day came and everything had to be disassembled, including the memorial board that listed all members and their families who had died during the last 70 years. The Torahs, which hold the first 5 books of the Bible, were one of the last items to go. The bima, which is the podium on which the Torahs are unrolled, was one of the only pieces of furniture that they took.
I saw the lectern in the new space, and we can meet here. It's going to be good. This will be our new home for now.
Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven.
Okay, so what does that mean? What do you think that means?
You have to actually act on your faith, not just believe.
Does that make sense? Kind of. It's important that we know God's word and that we know what it says, that we say we believe, but then we also have to act like it.
Natalie and Drew Hill have 5 children: Honey, Hutch, Macy Hart, Hobbs, and Huddle. Their home bustles with energy and friendship. When their children were young, they didn't want to send them to school for the majority of their day, but they wanted them to have the experience of school, backpacks, lunchboxes, and math tests. With some like-minded friends, they started a hybrid homeschool called the Covenant School. The children go to school 2 days a week when in elementary school, and Natalie homeschools them the rest of the time. With the addition of the twins this year, their faith community has showed up to help them keep all of this going. What started with a handful of children has grown into a school with more than 200 kids. But for the Hill family, it's part of the whole picture, a desire to raise their children with the love of Christ. As I've traveled the road, people have welcomed me in. I've seen a glimpse of our shared humanity. We are a diverse place. We have different religions. We have different skin color, different sexual orientations, and different political views. We accept chaos, but we look for elegance. We are creative, and we are unique. We value family, and we need solitude. Through all of this, change is the constant. The distinct contrasts that I found made me wonder if we are not better off for living with our diversity. My mother wrote, "People are like the road, changing, getting lost, disappearing, and then finding their way again, always changing." As I've worked on this project, I could feel my mother's touch, helping me understand our divided world that she no longer shares with me. So I will end with words from her story. Like a train whistle in the night, a road always calls us on, a ribbon into tomorrow. It tempts us with tales we haven't heard, and sights we haven't seen, and food we haven't tasted, and makes us wonder if we're like those people further on, or are we different?